Alright, words cannot properly express how much I have dreaded filming this video, because this is probably going to be the longest that I've taken to film anything since I've come back and started doing all of this. Everyone has been asking me, rightfully so, because of my social media and all that good stuff, about all the things that I've collected and acquired. Well, I already did a preface video on all of the physical games and everything that I've collected. Haven't done anything for the figurines or anything like that. Probably not going to, because it's not that interesting. I mainly only care about the gaming aspect of stuff. The other stuff is just a bonus. But without further ado, I suppose let's get into my favorite part of all this, and what I spend most of my time doing is collecting all of the consoles that I enjoy. So I have everything in my collection is based off of like me wanting what I had when I was a kid, and then up to now what I want to get into and what I jive with. That's why it kind of jumps around a bit, but I'm not a museum. I like to say that it's a museum. But I don't have every single thing that PlayStation has ever released. Such was not the goal when I started doing this. Such is still not the goal now. And it never will be. I just want the stuff that I'm into and what I think is cool. And as I go through this, hopefully you think it's cool with me. If not, that's totally fine. But I appreciate you watching anyway. So I guess we should start with the oldest thing that I have, which is the coveted PS1 with the pop top. Everybody knows this boy. It's a classic. Muy clásico. I don't have a ton of games for this. I have the 2 games that I played for PS1 back in the day to go with this boy right here. But it still works, still in pristine condition. I don't have the original controller without the analog sticks. I only have the controller that has the analog sticks. I will get the one without them because I do remember that. It's just finding them in good condition where they like work properly and everything and they're not all beat to shit is way harder than you think it would be. Mainly because I think when people were buying these, they didn't really have like longevity in mind. I think we're blessed enough to just have these still around in general, in the shape and form that we do. But yeah, this is the first PlayStation 1 that I've ever purchased. Got it from a place called Game Castle down here in down here near where I live, in Thomaston, Georgia. Super sick game store, super good stuff. Never bought a bad thing from them. Yeah, PS1 works great. It's awesome. I wanted the one from 1998 because when I was looking it up, you know, you've got like the PS1 that has like the screen and everything that goes with it. Not really into that, not really my thing. I just really wanted like the OG, like what I saw on my friends, you know, entertainment centers and stuff when I was a kid. So that's exactly what I got. And this is the first controller that I ever used when it came to PlayStation stuff. So super cool to have that. And then of course up next we've got the Slim Boy, the PS2 Slim. I do want a PS2 Fat because I saw them coming up, but I have not been able to find one in good condition. And I've mentioned this before, whenever I buy stuff, I like to actually do it in person and trade money for it. That way I've got, you know, the memory of, you know, where I bought it at. You know, I like having that interaction. Getting to talk to other people that think this stuff is cool is really cool. Got the coveted OG PlayStation 2 memory card that went with all of them. Super sick. I don't know if the camera will focus on it. And then yeah, PS2 Slim in great condition. I mean, it's just slim little boy, you know. And going from this is the first PlayStation that I ever owned for me and myself. So super special place in my heart for it, as well as the, you know, the DualShock 2 in good condition. This is still an original one, still works and everything. I'm really big on that. If I have a console, I want the original controllers that went with it. I have things like, you know, like I use a Brooks adapter for a lot of my controllers and stuff, to where I can use like, you know, my DualSense with PS3, stuff like that, just so I don't wear out the actual controllers for them, because I know, you know, everything wears down over time. But if I can, just for the shelf, because I leave it looking like a little museum, I might put in some shots of what everything looks like on the shelf normally behind me during post. But I just really want everything to be like the OG, like what I had when I got it out of the box. And that way, if anybody else wants to, like, you know, play it and enjoy it, they've got that option. And you can just, like, you have the experience exactly as it was meant to be, without any extra stuff on it. Now, you can do a bunch of funky stuff with PS2s, like, you know, putting custom firmware and stuff like that on them. I've seen people do that. I'm not going to do that with any of these. And actually, I've been having troubles out of the laser in this specific PlayStation 2, so it's time for a cleaning and a teardown. But PlayStation 2 is still sick. I don't care what anybody says. This was you know, punch and wait for the greatest generation there for a little while. I mean, it was just a baller console. All of my favorite childhood memories of playing video games like Ultimate Alliance and Crash and playing God of War 2 for the first time, all of my, like, core gaming memories, Metal Gear Solid 3 and everything, were on PlayStation 2. This was actually when I got back into collecting, or when I got into collecting consoles, rather. This was actually the first thing that I wanted to have and the first thing that I set up. And I was super happy when I got it, and I played it for like 3-4 days at a time. With that, while we're still in the, like, older console generation, I kind of want to mention, because I've been looking on a lot of forums and stuff lately, and I've seen a lot of, like, arguing about what the best way to go about playing your retro consoles and everything is. You can get a RetroTink 4K, or just a RetroTink 2X, whatever in general. If you want to save money and spend like $40 instead of like a couple hundred, I'm sure plenty of people know that these exist, but these little old school HDMI switches, they've got 4 inputs, you know, and then you've got your 16:9, 4:3, your 1080p or 720p input output and every options like that. These are great if you just want to, like, pop it up on like a OLED or something, put a screen filter on it, and it's got one HDMI output. So this is great for, like, you know, if you don't have enough money for a RetroTink. Usually you can find these at your local game shop or on Amazon, anywhere between 30 and 40 bucks. These work amazingly. Simple off-on switch. If you have more than one console, you can connect up to 4 at a time. If you just want to have a shelf, you know, with all of them sitting on it, and you just want to walk up and be able to boot them all up, you can do that. But this thing is great, especially if you're, like, capturing old consoles, because it only has one HDMI out. You can do your HDMI out as your pass-through for your capture card, or whatever you're capturing off of. It's great. I do have some of the Hyperkin, like, inline HDMI adapters that require secondary power and everything. This one's a little bit better because it's just USB-C, and you can just leave it on a brick and let it sit. Or you can power it off the console itself if you have a console that has USB ports. So you can, you know, USB A to C, leave this hooked up and running, it'll be enough to power it. But just because I see people talking about it a lot, you can use one of these old school adapters. They work perfectly fine. A RetroTink I have not tried in person, but after watching all the videos and everything, I don't really think, unless you're, like, really trying to bring the old school back to the new age, you can emulate a lot of stuff. You can buy a RetroTink if you just want to play it on the original hardware, but if you want it as close as to, like, what it was when you actually unboxed it and you were using it, the old school adapter is usually the way to go, because it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Pretty high fidelity when it comes to audio too. Like those inline adapters, like the Hyperkin inline adapters or the XYAB HDMI adapters for older consoles like this, there's always an issue with, like, either audio buzz or it being too close to the power supply, so you get some weird, like, feedback issues and everything. I like these because it's just an AV multi-tap, so you're not really changing anything with the console. You're not doing like an AV to HDMI inline converter. Everything's just going from AV, getting processed through the little box and sent back out through HDMI, which is exactly what a RetroTink does. The RetroTink actually just goes in and upscales the resolution and everything and can make other changes to it. It's a much more complicated device. Think of like this plus a Raspberry Pi with actual, like, processing and scaling features. That's kind of what that's for. This is a different use case entirely, I get it, but just for the sake of, like, you know, clearing the air a little bit about the old school adapters, they work perfectly fine. This is one of the few that I have, and they work good. I like them. They're great. I don't know why people always want to, like, shill for RetroTink. RetroTink is great, but it's not the only option, especially if you don't have the money, like enthusiast money, to do stuff with. This will suit you perfectly fine. And if nothing else, CRTs are pretty expensive, but if you hit like yard sales and stuff, you can find a lot of CRTs for like 20 bucks usually. And, you know, it's not that bad to do that. if you can find yourself a CRT and if you have somewhere to put it. So next up in our little historical line, after the PS2, PlayStation 3 was the generation that I was actually alive for the entirety of. I was alive for the entirety of PlayStation 2 as well, but I was not sentient yet. The flashbang hadn't gone off, so I wasn't aware of like how consoles and everything worked. When the PlayStation 3 released, I was well aware of it and was able to look up things online and read magazines and stuff about it. I did not get one until the year 2012. By which time there were still games being made for it, but we were at the tail end of the generation. The first time I saw a PlayStation 3 was the original manufactured model. I'm actually going to check these controllers here so I remember which one goes with which PS3. When I saw the original PS3 Fat, I was absolutely mesmerized, and then when I saw the demo for one of the worst games of all time called Lair, I think it was, that dragon game that used the motion controls, I was blown away because I didn't really know that much about it. So recently, I know I did a whole video about it, and you guys are probably going to give me shit for bringing it up again. I was able to get my hands on said PlayStation 3. This one is extremely special in both my heart and both in history. I love this thing. I quickly figured out after I made that video the HDMI port doesn't work on it, so I'm going to have to get it repaired, which is honestly perfectly fine with me because I use an AV multi-tap for most of this stuff anyways, like I was saying before. But this thing is great. A little bit of history for you, if you don't know. The PlayStation 3, this boy right here, this is a big boy, had one of the hardest processors to develop for in history. It had a cell processor. The cell processor was notoriously hated by developers because of how complicated the hardware was, and I'm going to try to dumb this down as much as possible because it is actually a very, very, very nerdy topic. It was an extremely hard console to develop for, and the fact that we got the good games that we did on it is a little bit of a miracle, but that's also why during the PS3 era you kind of saw some, you know, less than ideal ports from Xbox games to PlayStation 3. That all being said, PlayStation 3 for me, especially looking back on it, just had the aesthetic down. The aesthetic was great. It was nice, sleek, clean, all that good stuff. You know, it had a Blu-ray player built into it at the time. This was cheaper than some Blu-ray players. You also had your, you know, your 4 USB ports here. You had multiple, you got your CF, SD, and mini SD card readers, and then your Pro reader, which I don't remember what form of media that was for, and then a ball-and-ass disk drive. And then if you ever wanted to set it on its side, you can actually flip the PlayStation logo to go vertical with your PlayStation 3 to sit here. So yeah, this is the PS3 Fat, and it's absolutely awesome. Also, this is the first generation. This is going to blow a lot of people's minds, especially people that are my age. We didn't have wireless controllers in the PlayStation 2 era when I was coming up unless you went and bought one that was third party and had an actual adapter with it. PlayStation 3 was the first time that we ever got the DualShock 3 6-axis controller. There's two versions actually. As you can see, there's 6-axis, which is just 6-axis, and then your 6-axis DualShock 3. Both of them are printed differently. If you want to know more about the specs and the differences in them, I heavily encourage you to look it up. There's a lot of like historical gaming people that are much better at covering that stuff and explaining it than I am. This was the first generation in which we were able to use wireless controllers. This was a game changer because usually, if any of you remember and you were alive during the PS2 era, you would use your wired PS2 controller, and then right here where the cable connects to the controller, it would start to fray and then it would fall out and then your wires would get screwed up and you would need a new controller. Well, that was not the case with the PlayStation 3. PlayStation 3 had rechargeable controllers. A lot of the docks and like charging docks were still in their infancy back then. So like a lot of the stuff now, like what you set your controllers on to charge, didn't really work all that well. It still used the USB port in the top. Sometimes you could find battery packs that had pins and you can set them down like that, but it made the controller overly bulky. But this was the first time that a controller both had rumble, for me at least, both had rumble and like motion controls, which is why Lair, when the original PS3 Fat Boy came out, was such a huge deal because you could actually use the DualShock to steer and do stuff like that. And other games took advantage of it too. They didn't do a very good job to my knowledge because I played pretty much from front to back PS3 era once I actually got a PS3. But this was a really cool controller at the time. It was kind of neat to like have some of those mini games and stuff for when your friends come over, and you can be like, oh man, I've got the PlayStation 3, let me show you what it does, and then you can like show them the little motion controls. And PlayStation Move was cool too. We had the Wii by that point, but the PlayStation Move was really sick for PlayStation fans, because if you remember, there was a game called Resistance 3, and there were plenty of other games that did it too, that had PlayStation Move capability, where you could play with like a little rifle setup and everything with the PlayStation wand and all that stuff, and it was good. PlayStation 3 is honestly the generation that I remember making me go holy shit the most when I was a child, playing, you know, God of War 3, The Last of Us, being able to play Dead Island for the first time, Infamous, being able to play the newer Crash titles. I mean, if I'm forgetting anything, I've got a whole library back here. You know, Lord of the Rings War in the North, Lord of the Rings Conquest, one of the greatest games of that generation. Doesn't run that great on PlayStation 3, but it's great anyways. Dante's Inferno. Just this generation had so many bangers. But the PlayStation 3 fat, the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 were the beginning of the end for a certain little trend that we now know as mid-cycle refreshes, which is why I have two DualShock 3s, because you see, my friends, not only do you have the PlayStation 3 fat, but you also have, and let me uncover it here because some stuff fell over. I kind of have everything just sitting in the floor off to the side so it looks more fancy when I pull it up and pull it into the shot. Not only did we have the PlayStation 3 fat, but in between the PlayStation 3 fat and the PS4 generation, we had two more releases. A mid-cycle refresh of the PS3 Slim, which is what most people... We fell to our hubris in the worst way possible 20 years later, which is what most people had when I was growing up, because it looked a little more sleek, a little less retro, a little more understated. The shape was still weird. It was much quieter, didn't heat up as much. The back I/O was a lot simpler, and we also got knocked down from 4 to only 2 USB ports in the front, which is annoying. It's very annoying, because when you're a child, you tear up USB ports like they're replaceable or something, and your parents get extremely angry. But not only did we get the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 3 Slim mid-cycle refresh, which, if you need to know the size difference between these, I'm going to hold both of them side by side, sideways. Yeah, fat boy, slim boy. Definitely a big difference. At least a 4-pound difference. We also got the PSP release. I don't have a PSP in my collection because I'm waiting for one to pop up in good condition, but I do, my friends, have what I had, a PS Vita 1000, which was compatible with PlayStation 3. You could do the first instance of remote play was through PSP and PS Vita era, and these things are just super cool. They wanted the PS Vita to be kind of like a cell phone kind of deal. Never really ended up working that way, so you had different models. You had a lot of different models of the PS Vita. I wanted the one that I had, which is also the hardest one to find in decent condition. That still works and everything. So this is the OG. This one still works perfectly fine. Not a damn thing wrong with it, and I won't tell you otherwise. And this was also PlayStation's first little forte after UMD disc cartridges into using game cards, which is, you know, they got a little packet of Dungeon Hunter Alliance for you there. Them using game cards back then wasn't a huge deal, but the issue is that any mainstream mainline titles, like unless it was the God of War collection or Resistance Burning Skies, stuff like Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified that released on this thing really just did not hit that well. The main place where the PS Vita shone was like indie titles and side scrollers, dungeon crawlers, a lot of stuff like that. The PS Vita really talked its shit, and if you ever wanted to use it for remote play with, say, your PS4, or if you wanted to use any of the PS3 tie-in capabilities, this was a great console to have. It was a good little all-around, you know, tote it in your pocket kind of thing, and that's another point. This actually fit in your pocket. Still does. I mean, here's my iPhone 15 Plus for reference. I mean, they're roughly the same size. You can't really argue with that. This was what I hope we get back to, because we're going to talk about the PlayStation Portal here in a little bit, and the PlayStation Portal wishes it was PS Vita. And another thing with the PSP thing, PSP was great. It was part of this whole generation, this whole era. A lot of my friends had them. I could never afford one. it didn't have 2 joysticks, which kind of irks me, and even now when I try to play it, it not having 2 joysticks really bothers me. PS Vita, baby, all day. I'm team PS Vita till I fucking die, okay? I'm just telling you, PS Vita's better. But now that we've covered PlayStation 3, I know I'm going on a rant every time I pull one of these out. I should just be like, here's what I have, bop, 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 and then that's it. But no, we're going to talk about all this stuff, because I love nerding out about it. Now that we have covered PlayStation 3, it is only right that we cover what was my greatest, like, hype moment when I was a child. I was about 14 years old when these, 13, 14 years old when these came out. We've got the OG PS4 launch PS4. This one's super scratchy and scratched up. I have a lot of work to do with it to restore it. I just haven't gotten around to it. I cleaned out the internals and everything and took it apart, put it back together, and just didn't do any further cleaning on the outside. So you're gonna have to forgive me for the aesthetics of this one. But this is where we got another win for Team PlayStation, because with the PlayStation 4 being a huge bump in hardware, with games like Knack and all that good stuff, and having like one of the best E3 presentations that I have ever seen, because I was fucking hype. 13, 14-year-old me was fucking hype. I knew that I would probably never have one until I was an adult, but it did not stop me from being happy about it anyways. We got, and I'm glad that PlayStation kept doing this through the years, and they still continue to do it, the first iteration of the touchpad controller design from PlayStation in the form of the DualShock 4. This was fucking sick. So was Astro's Playroom and the whole Astro thing. It was fucking awesome. This thing had me so excited to play Assassin's Creed 4 for the second time on PlayStation 4 instead of PlayStation 3. Okay, because I just wanted to use this little touchpad here to scroll through the map. It was absolutely sick. That, and I just loved the sleek design of the PS4. It was nice, it was flat. You can kind of put it wherever you want. It looked very edgy, very sharp and everything, and it was a great console design. It was awesome. Not a huge fan of the shiny plastic on the side of the hard drive bay though, because it gets all scratched up and it's still scratched up. But then, you know, we talked about mid-cycle refreshes, right? We got the launch PS4, all the great what side are they on? They're behind the chair, but we got about 35 titles back there for PS4 on the shelf right now. Sorry, 42. Fucks that up. Then we get another mid-cycle refresh. So, for a little bit of history, whenever these released, 4K and everything was first coming around. A lot of us were still rocking like CRTs, 1080p displays, stuff like that, and then we're moving to 4K very, very slowly. And 60 frames a second was still pretty much reserved for like PC gamers, so there weren't a whole lot of console games that did it, and that wasn't a really big focus for developers like it is now. But when 4K displays and everything started to become a bit more popular, kind of halfway through the life cycle of the PlayStation 4, they came out with the idea of, oh, we need a bump in hardware. We already did the refreshes with PS3, PS3 Slim, and then Xbox had the Xbox 360 and the Xbox 360S, Xbox 360E, so on and so forth. PlayStation thought it would be a good idea, and it was, to go ahead and give us another mid-cycle refresh, and I have one of the cool ones, of the PlayStation 4 Pro. This thing was a Hail Mary for me when I was actually working and had enough money to buy myself a PlayStation 4, and I was a huge God of War fan. So having God of War 2018 release during the PlayStation 4's life cycle and being able to play it on the PS4 Pro, as well as like Red Dead 2 and stuff like that, it was kind of the first time, like, without a PC that a lot of console gamers were getting to like touch PC greatness in a way. It was one of those moments where like you turn your PlayStation 4 Pro on and you can, in some games the difference was pretty damn big. Like, we had Assassin's Creed Valhalla release around the PS4 PS5 era. The difference between PS4 Pro and PS5 was a bit much, especially according to the frame rate and everything, but you could really start to see towards the end of the PS4 generation how much extra horsepower was packed into this guy and how much more mileage you could actually pull out of your PS4 games with a PS4 Pro. In my opinion, this was the first mid-life cycle refresh that actually added a significant amount of power and fixed a lot of things, like using, you know, we got the update during the PS4 life cycle to where every PlayStation 4 could use HDR. That was great because Xbox was doing it at the time and really made it popular, and HDR is great. I still use it all the time, even on my OLED TV and on the Nintendo Switch too. HDR does make a huge difference in terms of your lighting and everything else. But the PS4 Pro was able to take the HDR and the checkerboard rendering and everything else, the upscaling at the time, which now we have AI and everything. Back then we didn't really dip off into that. There was no PSSR, anything like that. It was a lot of just raw hardware. They were still kind of trying to churn the gears and figure out how to make it work. The PS4 Pro was a real show of strength on PlayStation's part, and actually made a lot of people happy because it felt like the extra, you know, $200 or whatever you were spending, maybe $150, depending on where you were at. It was actually really, really worth it. And then they gave us what they usually give us, because PlayStation's very good about it, releasing special edition consoles. We got a lot of Spider-Man stuff. I have the God of War PS4 Pro here. We got a lot of stuff for the base PS4 models too. I wish they would have stayed with the sharp design for the PS4 Slim. I know this is the launch edition, but when they did the mid-cycle refresh, they kind of rounded out a lot of the corners, kind of like what you see on this. Kept like the obelisk type, you know, slant and everything. They kind of, you know, they had to beef it up because the chassis had to actually hold the hardware that was in it. But when it came to doing the actual aesthetics of it, I just wish it was a little bit sharper. Wish the corners were sharper. It doesn't bother me too much, but I think about it a lot. I think it was a missed opportunity. But with the PS4 Pro, not much else changed. You got a update in hardware, an update in horsepower overall. A lot of developers started taking advantage of all that horsepower and everything, which kind of rushed the end of the generation a bit, in my opinion. You had a lot of games that came out on PS4 Pro that were a little bit overzealous with what they did, and then when PS5 released, they really talked their shit. And I don't think that was intentional. I think that was more of like a, you know, we're kind of growing out of this era kind of deal. But it would have been really, really cool to kind of see, there were a bunch of titles developed specifically for PS4 Pro enhancement and everything, just like we have PS5 Pro enhancement going on today. But it would have been really cool to see if the generation had slinked out a little bit more. What kind of stuff they just would have figured out with the PS4 Pro hardware. Because, I mean, they didn't really, like, they hit the ceiling, but now we're kind of seeing that we're hitting the ceiling with hardware now. And they're still figuring out ways around that, like PSSR and stuff like that. And part of me wonders if they would have just waited a little bit longer with this generation, and if we were in the same spot, if they wouldn't have done the same thing. Not really relevant, but it's a cool thought, I think. At least if you're a hardware nerd, because some of the stuff they do is kind of mind-blowing from time to time. But yeah, PS4 Pro, love them to death. They're absolutely great. I love them. A lot of good games released for them too. Ghost of Tsushima, a lot of first-party PlayStation titles, which you can expect. A lot of, you know, Last of Us Part 2, all that good stuff. But also just a lot of good games during that generation in general. I mean, look, we got Dying Light. Dying Light was badass. Got Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor. Shadow of Mordor actually released between PlayStation 3 and PS4, and if you played the PS3 version of the game, it looked completely different from the PS4 version, and vice versa with the Xbox 360 and Xbox One because of the engine that they used. That's a whole other spiel, but if you've never played the Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor games, I heavily recommend it. And we also got the Doom Slayers Collection, Doom Eternal, Doom 2016. God, we got so much good stuff. Bloodborne was the big one, and Dark Souls 3 were the big ones for PS4. And let me tell you, heavy hitters, boys. They were heavy hitters. Heavy hitters. Onward. So we talked about the PS4. We talked about the PS4 Pro. All the history with those. So, not so long ago, my friends, we had a pandemic, or a plandemic, or a shit show, whatever you want to call it, really. Doesn't matter to me, right? With that being said, we also had one of the worst fucking console launches on the face of the planet, and that was the PS5. Oh, this baby right here. I'm not going to show off too much of the aesthetics of this one because we're still in this generation. If you don't know what one looks like, you're probably living under a rock. When this thing launched, it was notoriously hard to get your hands on one, and if you did, it was probably from scalpers. I paid $600 for the one that's sitting underneath my arms right now. I was not very happy about it at the time, but I really wanted a PS5 because there were a lot of games that I could not play that I wanted to play because they made me motion sick because they were chopped down fucking 24 frames a second. Yeah, man, it hurt. That purchase hurty. PS5 releases, right? And they're notoriously hard to get your hands on, as I've already said. And on top of that, you know, it was kind of hard to, like, you know, get games for them because people started scalping games in certain areas. Like in Georgia, we had a huge issue of people picking up all the physical games for it, so you were mainly stuck to digital. They had plenty of controllers and DualSenses out there, so I picked one up as a gamepad just to kind of feel like I had a PlayStation, even though I didn't. But the PS5 is a generation that's really, so far, really starting to talk its shit, which is great because it had a rough start, and for a lot of lifelong PlayStation fans like me, at some point really thought that maybe you'd just never get one. I mean, you know, you might have to just dip out on it, which is a damn shame because with the PS5, you had a bunch of options. So you had a digital edition and a edition with a disc drive, or the physical edition, if you will. Both of them came with the same hardware. The only difference was the inclusion of a disc drive. Not really any horsepower changes. And then we got one of the best controllers of all time, if not the best controller of all time, IMO, the PlayStation 5 DualSense, and this is just the long history of PlayStation kicking ass when it comes to accessories and good controllers. The DualSense is pretty much everything you could want in a controller with resistive adaptive triggers, as they call it. Triggers that actually make you feel like you're pulling the trigger on a gun or hitting the throttle in a car, stuff like that. And this was also the generation of just great first-party stuff that caters to the actual use of the DualSense. I'm very glad that PlayStation actually pushed incorporating that into a lot of games. And with the PS5 generation, you saw a lot of people being frustrated because they couldn't get one because it was one of the best-selling consoles of all time. And then now people, a lot of them have the console, and I haven't really seen the drop-off with the PS5 generation like I did in previous years with other gens. You know, usually a console comes out, everybody's super excited for it, people buy it, and then kind of halfway through they just start selling them off and getting rid of them because they're not really about it anymore, they're not really enjoying it as much as they have. I feel like the generation that we're in right now with PlayStation 5 has been littered with like really bad developer choices and really bad games releasing, and then really good games and really good choices that have kind of, you know, the pros have kind of outweighed the cons. Even though the state of the world's kind of fucked at the moment and everything else, I think the PlayStation 5 is really what, and the Xbox Series X, if you will, because I'm not hating on Xbox, I'm just not interested in them, because I've owned them all. I feel like this generation, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, has done a lot of good for gaming. Say what you want about price hikes and everything else like that. It was really, really, really cool to see me being a PC gamer, obviously, right there, you know, sitting behind me. Getting to see my friends that weren't well versed in like how good games could look on a high refresh rate screen, or let alone just them being able to play in 60 frames a second for the first time and being like, oh wow, this is noticeable. Or like certain games, like when people get motion sick with like jittery stuff in 24 frames, them having 60 FPS patches for PlayStation 5 was just really cool to see people have the opportunity to play stuff in this like super high fidelity, premium feeling fucking setting. It's just super awesome. And this is exactly what the PlayStation 5 promised and what it delivered. And then shortly after, I know I've already done a video on it before, I say shortly after, but it's been a few years, you get the PS5 Pro. And it just does more of the same. Now, the controversy with the PlayStation 5 Pro, my friends, is long, hard, arduous, and still kind of aggravating to this day. So I'd rather regale you with the tale of PlayStation's first step back into what they wanted to be mobile gaming, the PS Portal. I'm actually a huge fan of the PlayStation Portal. If you don't know, this is not a console by itself. This is purely a streaming device where you can stream games from your PlayStation 5 that's in rest mode at home and play them on the go as long as you have an internet connection. Not a mobile console, just a streaming portal. You can do the same thing with your phone and a DualSense if you want to carry two separately. I got this for the shelf to go with the collection, and I also did use it a lot when I first got it. The Nintendo Switch 2 has taken place of this lately, but it's not because this is bad. I don't want to put a bad taste in anybody's mouth with that. This is actually very good. I didn't have a lot of issues with it when I was using it very heavy. The only issues I ever had was kind of like connection issues, and I'm pretty sure that was on me because I was using a hotspot. Now, if you're a PlayStation Plus member, you actually have access to use the Cloud Stream beta for this, which is awesome because the cloud streaming actually works great. I played Orcs Must Die for like 4 hours one day on my phone hotspot and didn't have any issues at all. It was super awesome. I actually love the PlayStation Portal. A lot of people hate on it because it'll never be a PS Vita. It'll never be like its own mobile portable console. But it's 2025. We're getting, are we midway through? We're midway through 2025. So we'll probably see another handheld from them. I mean, you can't really be mad at it. And with the PS5 Pro being a good mid-cycle refresh again that everybody's pissed at for some reason, once again, made a whole video on that. I'm just talking about what I have, what I've collected. We're in a good spot for gaming. I mean, you can't really argue that one way or the other. And I think the last thing when it comes to like my hardware boasting, or whatever you want to call this, all of these boxes of metal and processors that I've acquired, I talked a lot about PlayStation just having like banger controllers and coming out with really good stuff and really cool features and everything. Well, we've had the Xbox Elite controller for a long time, and I loved the Xbox Elite controller. I used it as my main PC controller as a gamepad forever. Used it as a travel controller for my phone and everything for as long as I can remember. And then PlayStation comes out basically to beat me with a stick and knock coins out of me like a fucking Mario character, and releases the DualSense Edge, which is everything I loved from the Xbox Elite controller put onto a DualSense with removable thumbstick modules, so you can replace them if they break for like 20 bucks. Yeah, PlayStation fucked me up with this one. And then they gave me a very good little like carrying case and everything. I keep my black one in pristine condition for the little museum kind of feel. So this is actually the second time this case has ever been opened. This is just such a good controller. It's just so good. It's so good, dude. It's such a good... If you like the DualSense Edge is so fucking great. And if you... I'm not going to be the guy that's like, for you to get the real experience, you have to buy a $250 controller, or else it's not worth it. No, absolutely not. The regular DualSense is fucking great. If you're somebody that uses it every single day, though, for everything, and you use a Brooks adapter like I do, to where you can like plug in whatever controller you want to whatever console, this thing, the battery life is great. Replaceable stick modules. It's just great. It's awesome. And a lot of, PlayStation games being ported to PC use the adaptive triggers too. So just having a DualSense is actually pretty cost effective and neat when you want to have the PlayStation experience on PC. But yeah, I think it's important to, is it probably frivolous for me to own all of these consoles and have them and keep them and everything like I do? Probably so. A lot of this stuff I could probably play on the PlayStation back catalog, but I will say my piece on, if there's not certain people that preserve all of this hardware and everything and all of these games that are behind me and all of the, cool controllers and stuff like that and preserve the history. I know there's plenty of us out there that do, but if people don't do it, very good parts of your childhood will go extinct. That happens all the time. There's toys that you can't find anymore, stuff like that. And for me, having all this be such a pivotal experience of mine growing up, I feel like it's very important to preserve it for another generation, if nothing else, just for people to be able to look back and see where everything started and where we're at now and everything that happened in between. But that's just to get ahead of all the people like, you can just emulate everything. I do emulate a lot of stuff. I only emulate what I have. That's all I need to do. Everything that I've done emulation wise comes from my collection. So that's just a personal pet peeve of mine. I don't care what other people do. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to sit here and gush and go through everything that I have, everything that I've accumulated. Maybe in another year or two, maybe in another 6 months or so, I'll go through and I'll have even more stuff to talk about, and we can pick up right where we left off here. But we'll see. I've been pretty busy with the Switch 2 coming out, trying to do testing with that thing, trying to get this whole video organized and whatnot, and yeah, I don't know. This is cool. If you think this is cool, give it a like, share it with your friends. If you want to see some PlayStation history and you want to look at some feral motherfucker talking about all the, you know, stuff with PlayStation logos he's got on it all around his house, go for it. I always appreciate it. Yeah, so this has been fun. I appreciate you guys. I love you very much, and I hope you have a good rest of the week. I don't know when I'm posting this. I just hope you have a good day. Later.